Ash Bluff sat under a sky so wide, it made even the mountains feel small. It was the kind of place where the wind carried secrets, and the silence told you more than the people ever would. In the summer of 1872, that silence deepened not with peace but with dread. Something unspoken hung in the air, like the wait before a storm breaks. Thomas McGraw guided his cattle through the western pasture, the leather reins worn to softness in his hands. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had seen war and waited out blizzards. His hat sat low against the rising sun, shadowing eyes that had once looked across bloodied fields and now just watched the slow pace of a herd. To any outsider, he was simply a rancher. But in Ash Bluff, he was the only one left who still owned land without owing it to someone meaner. From the porch of their modest ranch house, Clara McGraw watched him. Her apron was dusted in flour, and her hands trembled slightly as she dried them on the fabric. 34 years old, she had the look of someone who had learned to smile carefully, to preserve warmth in a world too eager to take it. She waved. He tipped his hat. Inside the house, a pot simmered with beans and a sliver of salted pork, Thomas's favorite. He'd eaten it the first night they moved here, 12 years ago. Just them, a borrowed wagon, and the kind of wild hope only fools and the newly married could afford. They'd come west after the war, believing they could stake out a quiet life, raise a family, build something that no army or general could tear down. But peace didn't settle in Ash Bluff. Not really. That morning, a stranger had passed by the ranch, not a settler, older, skin tanned deep by sun and years, hair tied back with leather, his eyes like coals burned low, met Clara's for only a second as he whispered in his tongue. Then in broken English he walks into shadow. Raven waits on the wind. She hadn't told Thomas. What would he have done? Laughed or worse, believed it. By midday the cattle were calm. Too calm. Birds didn't sing, not even the coyotes, yipped across the ridgeline. When Thomas returned to the porch, he handed her a telegram. The papers shook in his grip. From the marshal in Black Ridge, he said, Jedediah Barrows is headed this way. Riding with 5, maybe 6. Took out a farmstead north of the Snake River, burned it. Clara's breath caught. She'd heard the name Barrows, a name spoken low in saloons, in the pauses of drifter stories. Not just a man, but a shadow that moved in daylight. They won't come here, she said, though her voice betrayed her. They will, Thomas answered. Simply, I testified against his brother. He swore I'd pay. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. She could feel the heartbeat there, steady but heavy. He smelled of sweat and horsehair and the wind that came before rain. You can ride, she said. Go to Fort Huxley. Find soldiers. Thomas shook his head. Too far in the law. Don't come fast for folks like us. He saddled up after supper. She stood beside him, holding out the old Colt revolver he kept by the mantel. He hesitated, then tucked it into his belt. You come back, she said. I mean it. Thomas McGraw. Don't you leave me in this world without you. His lips touched her forehead. Ain't no power gonna keep me away. As he rode down the trail into Ash Bluff, the dust trailed behind him like a ghost's breath. The town sat small against the horizon, just 12 buildings, a church with broken windows, and a saloon that never closed. He passed the smithy, the schoolhouse, and finally hit Main Street, lined with shuttered windows and eyes watching from behind curtains. He didn't make it to the sheriff's office. A single sound cracked the silence. A gunshot. It echoed like thunder off the mesa, rolling out over the ranches, the canyon, the dry bones of the land itself. Clara stood on the porch, breath held tight in her lungs. She looked up at the sky. The wind had shifted. She knew, without seeing, without hearing a name. She knew. The hooves didn't stop. Clara didn't remember saddling the horse. Just the cold blur of mounting, of wind slicing through her hair as she charged down the dusty trail toward town. Her breath came hard, dry as the earth beneath her, and her fingers clutched the reins so tight they went white. Ash Bluff loomed ahead, still and somber. The townsfolk were gathering, slow as ants after rain. A few lingered on porches, arms crossed, hats low over their eyes. Nobody moved to meet her. Then she saw him. Thomas lay sprawled in the dirt, face down, one boot twisted unnaturally. Blood had soaked the ground beneath his chest, turning dust to rust-colored mud. The sun hit his body like it didn't care, warming, a corpse that had cooled too soon. Clara dropped from her saddle and ran, knees giving out beside him. She turned him gently. His eyes were still open, staring at the sky. A whimper tore from her throat. No scream, just a broken sound like a dying bird. She clutched at his shirt, tried to shake him, as if she could jolt the life back in. But he was gone, long gone. Round her boots shuffled. Voices whispered. Wasn't even a fair fight. Didn't see it happen. Barrows boys, what do you expect? Nobody came closer. Nobody touched her. She looked up. The sheriff stood, a few feet away, thumbs tucked into his belt. Sheriff Cale, a man who once swore to Thomas he'd never let Ash Bluff go to rot. You gonna do something? She asked, voice thick, shaking. The sheriff's jaw clenched. They earn half the town, Clara half the county. They came fast, left faster. I got no men, no guns that can match theirs. Her face twisted. Then what good are you? He didn't Answer just turned and walked back to his office. A door closed behind him like a coffin lid that night. Clara sat alone beside the grave they dug just past the tree line where Thomas used to watch the sunrise. The stone was simple, no cross, just his name etched by a trembling hand. She knelt, fingers tracing the fresh dirt. "You promised," she whispered. "You said no power would keep you from coming back." She cried then, not loud, just deep, like something old had split inside her. The stars were cruelly bright, the wind colder than it should have been. "I swear to you," she said, voice rising with the wind, "I'll send them to hell myself." Back at the ranch, the silence grew heavier. Clara sat in their bedroom, the bed too large now, the walls too close. She pulled open drawers, tore back rugs, searching for something, anything. And then, under the floorboards where the wood creaked just wrong, she found it, the Sharp's rifle dot. It was wrapped in cloth, oil-stained and familiar. Thomas had used it once to shoot a wolf clean off a ridge half a mile out. She remembered how he cleaned it, always careful, like it was a sacred thing. She held it now, fingers grazing the worn stock. The weight felt foreign and familiar all at once. Out past the barn, someone watched. A figure stood near the ridge, silent as stone, tall, broad-shouldered, bare-chested under a buffalo hide coat. His hair was braided tight, dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. Strange markings traced his arms and face, tribal paint faded by time. Clara saw him only for a moment before he turned and vanished into the trees, like smoke in wind. Of the next day brought no peace. They came just after dawn. 3 men, armed and loud. One hollered her name, claiming the ranch now belonged to the Barrows family. Said she had until sundown to leave. She didn't answer, just stayed inside, breath slow, rifle across her lap. When the first of them kicked open the door, she fired. The shot echoed like a bell. The man fell backward into the dust, his hat tumbling beside him. The others fled, spooked and unprepared for a widow who'd bite back. Clara stood there in the doorway, chest heaving. Smoke curled from the rifle's mouth. Her hands trembled, but she didn't drop it. Later she dragged the body behind the barn. Digging wasn't easy. The ground was dry, and the sun didn't let up, but she buried him. Said no prayer. Her shirt clung to her skin with sweat. Blood dotted her sleeves. A fly buzzed near her ear. She stood there a long while after, staring at the shallow grave. A single thought repeated in her mind, cold and sharp: this is just the beginning. The morning after the raid, Clara set up bottles along the old fence post, 6 of them, some still stained with the last of Thomas's whiskey. She loaded the Sharp's rifle, bracing the butt against her shoulder like he taught her back when shooting was a pastime, not a purpose. She breathed slow, remembered his voice behind her. Squeeze, don't jerk. Rifle's an extension of your will, not your fear. The first shot missed wide, the second cracked the neck of a bottle. By noon she'd hit 4. By dusk, she was shooting 2 at once, reloading faster, breathing calmer. Her hands stopped shaking. Her heart didn't. Food was low, and she wasn't going to beg for help, so she hunted. Not well. At first, she tracked too loud, stepped too fast, missed more than she hit. A rabbit here, a skinny deer there. She skinned them herself, remembered the way Thomas showed her how to work the blade along the sinew, where to slice clean behind the ears. The memory stung. Every motion reminded her she was alone. One night, she awoke to growling, low guttural, wrong. 3 wolves had come down from the ridge, lean and hungry. She scrambled barefoot into the cold, rifle in hand. The first she shot before it reached the chicken coop. The second lunged, and she clubbed it with the butt of the rifle, screaming, blood slick on her arms. The third ran. Her arms ached for days. Still, the ranch held, and so did she. In town, the general store went quiet when she walked in. The shopkeeper gave her canned beans without meeting her eye. A woman near the flour whispered to another, "That's her McGraw's widow. Heard she killed a man and didn't flinch. Heard she talks to the dead now." They weren't wrong. At night, Clara sometimes heard Thomas's voice. Not clearly, just a murmur in the wind, or in the way the walls creaked as the house settled. Once she looked into the mirror and thought she saw his face behind hers. Another time, she dropped to her knees in the barn and wept until the hay soaked with tears. She screamed into her hands. No one heard or no one cared. Then came the cougar. It was dusk. She was tracking a fox that had been stealing her eggs, crouched low in the tall grass, when the growl came behind her. Deep, heavy. She turned. Too slow. The cougar pounced. She rolled, raising the rifle, but the beast was already midair. Claws flashing, and then an arrow struck it through the throat. The cougar fell in a silent heap, dead before it hit the ground. Clara gasped. Looking up, he stood over her again, the same man, silent, watchful eyes, dark and unreadable. You shouldn't hunt alone, he said. It was the first time she heard his voice. Gravel and smoke. She sat up, heart still racing. You followed me. He shrugged. Watched. You ain't ready. Then teach me. His eyes narrowed. Why? Because I've got men to kill. A long silence passed. The wind shifted. Then he nodded once. Silas. That's all he said before turning into the trees. He returned the next day. No greetings, no questions. Just motioned her into the hills. They rode hard long days across the dry backlands, narrow canyons, ridgelines where buzzards circled. Far above, Silas taught her how to move like the land mattered, how to read tracks, find water in dry riverbeds, lay snares without wasting meat. He said little, corrected her posture with a tap to the elbow, nudged her boot when she stepped, too loud when she faltered. He let her. When she cursed, he smiled faintly, like he'd seen far worse than her temper. Each night, they shared fire but few words. Clara learned to speak less, feel more. She studied how Silas watched the world as if it were speaking and he alone. But here at their bond wasn't built on stories or confessions. It grew in silence, in shared hunger, in long rides where they said nothing but learned everything about each other's grit. After 3 weeks, Clara rode alone into a canyon known as Ruthless Pass. There, 3 Barrows men camped, drunk and loud around a fire. She waited until nightfall, picked them off with 2 shots and a knife. She left behind a white ribbon ripped from her only dress tied to a tree above their corpses. By dawn, the whole county whispered her name, the widow of Ash Bluff. Some called her Ghost, others called her Witch. Jedediah Barrows called her a problem. He stood before a dozen men in a Bonton war room, eyes black under his hat brim. She thinks she's brave, he said. She's just a woman with nothing left to lose. Then he pulled a piece of paper from his coat, held it high. The bounty was inked in blood red, $200 alive, $100 dead. The hunt had begun. They came at night. 12 of them, riding hard under a silver moon, their silhouettes long and monstrous against the dry hills. The ranch was sleeping, but Clara wasn't. She'd grown used to dreams shattering into noise, but this wasn't thunder. This was hooves and shouting, and fire. By the time she ran from the barn, the east fence was ablaze. The flames licked up the timber, sending sparks into the black sky like wild stars. She rushed toward the stables. Her mare, Juniper, was screaming inside. She flung open the gate. Smoke burned her eyes, her lungs. Juniper was thrashing against her stall hooves, bleeding from splinters. Clara cut the rope with shaking hands, leading the horse through the flames as the barn roof groaned above them. A beam cracked. Clara pushed Juniper free just as the fire collapsed behind them, roaring like some demon sealed back into hell. The Barrows gang didn't stay to finish the job. They wanted to scare her, wound her. They wanted to see her crawl, but she didn't, not this time. The next morning, Silas found her standing barefoot in the charred soil, rifle in hand, eyes dry and red. "We end it," she said. He nodded. For the next 4 days, they rode the canyons, set traps where the walls narrowed, tripwires, pits, rifle nests hidden in high brush. Clara marked maps by candlelight, sketched ambush points and fallback trails. Silas whittled stakes, strung wire, watched the sky. Clara baited the Barrows gang with whispers, paid an old prospector to spread word she'd hold up with a cache of gold, that she was alone, that Silas had left her. By dusk on the 5th day, the plan was set. They waited in Hollow Creek, a narrow gulch, boxed in by sharp red cliffs and thorny ravines, the kind of place you don't enter without knowing you'll bleed on the way out. The gang came just after noon. First came 2 scouts. Clara dropped one clean with a shot to the throat. Silas took the other with a knife thrown so smooth it didn't even make a sound hitting home. Then the real storm came. Gunfire cracked through the canyon like a lightning storm. Clara crouched behind a boulder, reloading fast, fingers moving. On instinct, dust exploded around her as bullets struck stone. She fired back once, twice, each shot taking a man off his horse. Screams echoed up the walls. Silas moved like smoke, like wind. 1 minute beside her, the next across the gulch, firing arrows with deadly grace. He dropped 3 men before the gang knew where he was. They scattered, panicked, running straight into the traps. One rider tripped a wire, his horse reared, flinging him into a nest of sharpened stakes. Another's mount stumbled into a pit, both of them swallowed by the earth. Soon there were only 4 left. Then 2. Then just 1. Jedediah Barrows stood in the center of the canyon. The bodies of his men sprawled around him like broken dolls. Blood streaked his duster. His hat was gone, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. Clara stepped out from behind the rock. He recognized her instantly. "You think this changes anything?" he spat, revolver still smoking in his hand. "You think killing me brings him back?" She didn't answer. He raised his gun. She fired first. The bullet hit him just above the heart. He staggered, dropped to his knees. Blood soaked his shirt, a red bloom against the dust. Still he looked up. "You ain't no rancher's wife," he hissed. "You're just another killer." She lowered her rifle slowly, walked toward him. "What you made me." He had died with her shadow falling over him. And then nothing. Silence fell over Hollow Creek. No birds, no wind, just dust and blood and the slow, steady breath of a woman who'd survived. Clara turned to Silas. He stood on the ridge above, watching Their eyes met. No words passed. He gave her a slow nod, then disappeared into the brush, gone like a breath held too long. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. She never saw him again. When she rode back to Ash Bluff, townsfolk emerged from behind doors and curtains. Some came with hammers, others with nails. They rebuilt her barn, patched her fence, fixed the windows the fire had cracked. No one asked for thanks. Even the sheriff came 3 days late, hat in hand. She didn't to speak to him, just watched as he walked the perimeter of the ranch, counting graves, chewing guilt like tobacco. The ranch lived on. Spring came early. The fields turned green again. Wheat sprouted where fire had once ruled, and inside the small house on the hill, Clara rocked gently in a chair carved by Thomas's hands. In her arms, a child, soft-cheeked, dark-haired, swaddled in linen the color of ash. She called him Thomas Jr. He had his father's eyes. Ash. She watched the wind roll over the fields. Her voice rose soft and steady, more prayer than story. I thought they could kill what we planted, but roots run deeper than blood. They took my heart, but I kept my soul. And a soul armed with fire cannot be buried.